just like a friend from back home.
This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio.
PHLV Radio.
It's time to get real. Get real. Talking about the things you wanna hear. It's time to get real. Get real. We got it all right here. It's time to get real. Get real. Better buckle up, get real, get set. It's time to get real. Get real. We got it all right here. Come on. Whoa. Whoa.
All right, good afternoon, Los Angeles, California, broadcasting here, and of course, in our home network studio in Las Vegas, Las Vegas at California, pinagsama. Las Vegas, good morning, Philippines. It's another Get Real episode, of course, and I hope everyone's doing well. Let us welcome on the show, of course, my beautiful co-host, Sherlene.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Get Real TV right here on PHLV radio station.
Ang ganda-ganda naman talaga na aking co-host. How have you been? How was your week? Like during the Holy Week, anong mga pinaggagawa mo? What have you been doing?
Well, it was good. I was not able to spend time with my family, but being able to reflect on a lot of things, it helps to have that weekend to yourself.
Yes, and abstain
How about you?
And abstain from meat. That's the most important. That's
right.
The most important part. Well, dito lang kami in LA, just practically taking care of a lot of things, preparing for some great things. We're taking care of, and helping out Beyond Image, which is a skincare, a medical spa business of my cousin. And it was a time where we've taken things, slow during that week. But, alam mo, I was very surprised kasi it didn't occur to me how, people here in the United States are taking the Holy Week, as an event and activity. So, parang feeling ko on
I know.
Monday, Thursday, and Friday, sarado lahat, just like how we're accustomed in the Philippines, culturally, it's
Right.
like a sacred week where you fast, you abstain, and hold a lot of things. Pero yan, life must go on. Iba talaga pa rin ang culture.
I know. That's what I miss in the Philippines.
Yes, in the United States. But today is really very special. But let me greet, of course, our first couple of viewers who's here. Maraming salamat po for tuning in. Hindi ko po nakikita kung who's here right now. I couldn't read. But thank you. Darling LC Borges Kayana, good morning to you. Or good afternoon, shall I say? Good evening in here. But today, Sherlene, is really very special. It's, our guest is someone that I so admire, and I've met him a couple of years back during an engagement in the United Nations, wherein this guy is a champion for gender equality and is doing a lot of things right now in conjunction with a lot of the social development goals. Familiar ka ba sa SDGs ng United Nations?
Not so much, and this will be my opportunity to learn about.
All right, there you go. So this conversation will open a lot of things for all of us. Because we have on the show, and I think this is the first time that we will have as a guest, Mr. Fred Sullivan, of course, one of the co-founding members and the male champion for all the things that we are pushing through as far as gender equality and is concerned. Let us welcome on the show, Mr. Fred Sullivan.
Hello. How are you?
Ayan. Hello, Fred. Can you greet our viewers and say hello to your hundreds and hundreds of followers in our Man Up campaign group?
Yes. I'm Fred Sullivan. I'm Executive Director of Man Up Campaign, and we're an all-volunteer organization working on engaging youth and stopping gender-based violence around the world. So we, depend on young leaders wanting to get engaged, learn more about the subject, and do projects in their own community. So
So far, you mentioned, so I wanted to ask what Man Up campaign is doing. So there you go. You've already paved the way for the first question. But Fred, when did you actually founded Man Up campaign, and what was your primal motivation? Why Man Up campaign?
So one of my friends was actually working on a documentary film of on child soldiers, which is, a problem created by light arms and people trying to exploit resources and people. So these light arms, they could have young children use them, and they're engaged in conflicts around the world. So he was working on that issue as a documentary film, and the author was a music journalist and war correspondent, Jimmy Briggs, who had written a book called Lost Innocence, and it was on the conflicts in specifically Sri Lanka, DRC area in East Africa, several of the countries there, and Myanmar and Colombia. So they asked me, actually, I'm a technical person. I make websites and build complicated applications and systems. And so he asked me to design a serious game on this child soldiers conflict. But so I was engaged in this, and he, Jimmy, the author, was engaged in traveling around the world all the time to cover these wars. And he kind of was excited by it, he was interested by it, but he saw so much violence against, women and children in conflicts and wars. They always suffer the most. So he had a young daughter who was around 7, and my young daughter was 1 at that point. But of course, he wanted to be a more engaged dad and be able to spend more time. So he said, what could I do that's different than war correspondence and music journalism, where I travel around all the time? And he really thought that we needed to engage young men and young women that could really change the situation, because it's an attitude, it's norms that allow violence to happen in our societies that are most often shaped by what men believe.
Men believes, right.
And this militarism and security is always around arms and weapons and law enforcement. But real security, especially if you view it with the gender lens, is education, food, safety.
Right, the basics, the very basics of
home.
Right.
So, there's so few women in political situations, especially in conflicts and settling conflicts, and so few in policy, that needed to change. And where it can change most is by engaging young people, because they have the idealism, they need to find ways to create value in their community and society, and they're flexible and create new culture as they proceed through their whole life cycle. So, that's the way that we can really change this world. And it's so tragic now to see, an inter-country conflict, which the UN has been very successful since World War II in preventing, countries taking countries by force, and all the tragedy that happens. I mean, now we have, civil wars in countries, which are terrible too.
Yes, it must have been very difficult for the other to actually be traveling around and seeing what's happening, just from our perspective, reading the news. And that is the primary reason why I don't read the news anymore, because there's so much more going on. and there's so
Right.
much hate and there's so much crime, and especially that involves women and young children. So from then on, Fred, when you've established alongside with other organizations, Man Up Campaign, because I am part of Man Up Campaign, and I'm so very proud as to what Fred and the rest of the people had taken steps. I used to be actively participating, but I really couldn't keep up.
Wow.
With a very fast schedules, Fred. But right now, where are you as far as Man Up? And you mentioned to me about movies, music. There is something about Man Up Campaign that talks about G Smart. Do you want to actually just discuss in brief what G Smart is all about?
Yeah, so we founded Man Up, by bringing teams of 2 to 4 youth to the World Cup in 2010, because the soccer is one of the sports that every nation around the world almost enjoys. So that was a big draw, so we could engage young men as well as young women in that event, a training event and summit. And we also had the attractors of music, and music is a universal way people connect, and especially young
It's the
people.
universal language.
Yes. And then technology, it was future kind of way that we were able to actually in 2010, construct and reach out to youth all around the world. So we had around 100 youth from 24 countries and 3 indigenous countries. They put together proposals on sports, music, or technology to address some of the basic gender-based violence issues. So we expanded it to kind of maybe a more markety type thing called Be Smart. So it's about learning about gender through, our passions: sports, music, arts, selection, and technology.
Right.
So it's almost all the spheres, and these are areas that, engage peers, and you can, I guess, to use sophisticated words, deconstruct and reconstruct society in a more peaceful way. So
right, it's much more appealing to actually put it that way when most common interest of the youth, if this is actually the reach that we want to actually reestablish or recultivate, whatever it is that we actually want to engage them through music, arts, sports, and technology. But
Keeping them away from the violence, right?
Yeah, the violence, there's so different types of violences. So, from domestic violence to human trafficking, to female genital mutilation, early marriage. These are often things that, women and non-gender conforming people are subject to so many types of violences individually and structurally. So that's what we want to address. And Man Up campaigns, like Man Up is a hip hop word, to kind of be tough or take responsibility in our minds to stop gender-based violence or violence against women most often. So that allows young men to participate, whereas feminism, gender, some of these are very abstract, and men behave how they think their peers think that they behave, not necessarily even internally guided, because most men have mothers that they love and
that
sisters,
they look up to.
And also the upbringing, right, of the family, parents, and seeing them how women are viewed. That's something that needs to change, and the youth are our new generation. That maybe we could change the way that they see women against violence domestically or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Fred, I have a question for you. How to break this stigma wherein we're living in decades and decades or hundreds and hundreds of years where culture and norms are still being in place, especially in the Middle Eastern region, where these gender-based violence are very predominant, and how men think how to treat women,
Right.
or whatever that is happening in the world right now, not only in the Middle East. I, for once, actually, that's the reason why Fred and I got together, because I was also fighting domestic violence against women and children. And he was one of the people that came out who's championing this, or who's heading a campaign for this. But right now, how are we changing this, Fred?
Well, there's a lot of different levels. I mean, from the youth projects to, we worked together at the UN, and SDGs set frameworks, and the UN sets policy, like recommendations and studies continuously. So there's the Conference on Women, Status of Women, International Women's Day. It usually kicks off in Women's History Month.
Women's History Month in March, right?
A lot about education. Right now, it's in all realms. So there's a convention called ILO, International Labor Organization C190. And it's a new convention which specifies stopping sexual harassment and gender-based violence in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very comprehensive set of kind of law framework that countries are now in the process of ratifying around the world. So I think we're around 6 or 8 that have ratified it. It becomes part of the UN, kind of world or international law when 3 countries have ratified it. So we've been really working on that campaign for the last 3 years, starting in, kind of at 16 days of activism, which happens.
I know, right? I was once part of that 16 days of activism, and I know the campaign had helped tremendously. For as we all know, education is key to actually take the first step in changing what has been done, or how we are living in our society. But Fred, when we talk about gender, could you share to our viewers the difference between gender equity and gender equality?
Yeah, so gender equality is our individual, human rights, how we're treated, and having that human dignity, and kind of all of those individual circumstances. There's a theory called intersectionality that's kind of explains that our race or the gender construct, plays on our social class and where we're located, make, the burden of gender equality, inequality, and violence, different on different peoples, according to different cultures and traditions and their family. And then there's gender equity, which is the construct or the society, and how that structures behavior. So in G-Smart, we have R, which is reflection. You might reflect by taking a run, taking a shower. These are some of your personal ways that you reflect on what you might aspire to, and how you might use or create value in your community. But it's also, religion. We don't often, examine that in nonprofits or in kind of secular world, but religious constructs shape how people believe, and there's different I guess imams in Islam, so there's a whole range because it's very actually it's quite a decentralized practice. So there's very different interpretations of the Quran and how people should be created or treated. And it was, when written, quite an advance in the treatment of how men and women, you know, were treated and behaved, and that's interpreted and reinterpreted by you know, generations as the Bible and many spiritual traditions. So you know, so we construct our societies together, you know, this, and so, you know, to, you know, to the base, I think, of everything is getting at the root of human dignity, you know?
Right. And that's like, that's a really very tough agenda to actually achieve, by achieving or going into the roots of human dignity, which is like really, really far out. But with the help of a lot of organizations around globally, of course, with your projects, how is Man Up Campaign financing all of these projects in place? Because, you know, putting together such programs and a lot of things, or involvement of the organization, takes a lot of financing.
Well, we don't really finance very much because we're an international organization on gender, and we're men and women. Usually a lot of funding goes to, you know, women's organizations working on gender. So we've kind of like work kind of like a religion, or kind of like a voluntary organization, and mobilize, you know, youth working with their organization based in a local community. They can raise money, and we can lend expertise. We can lend a global voice. If people come to, you know, New York and UN headquarters, oftentimes they can speak and elevate and basically their visibility, and also input into policies. And you know, I try and become a conduit when I can for that. We're starting a new G-Smart hub. If you go to the manup.org website, and it's got all 14 SDGs, and what we call it the champion's journey, when you take the youth and gender lens and become a champion of equality, inclusion, and opportunity. So there's hopefully you can start to discuss and team up with people around the world and get ideas. There's a lot of funding opportunities and sources that we have in there, and then we hope that, you know, in gender and many of the SDGs. So, you know, if you sign up there, you can get your organization engaged and hopefully share your curricula, your seminars, your fundraising. We have, you know, Facebook and a Facebook group, of course.
A group, and a group.
That gets a little diffuse, and so
when you say the fundraising, are you trying to involve, you know, music here? Being the youth, getting involved into music, do they do concerts or something like that?
Well,
you know, to raise money.
I mean, there's so many different ways. You know, there's grant funding. We hope to help support some, you know, some new blockchain NFT type initiatives. Since we're in technology, so I've started a little bit of a Discord channel. When we get around to it, we'll start to hopefully move around some funds that way. But it's, you know, it really is dependent on the project and the situation. So we have had World Bank grants to do gender norms change media campaign in Eastern Africa. We've worked with the Lions Club on education in India. You know, different, you know, local, some local grants, and then some just small fundraising, you know, here or there for materials and you know, activities around 16 days of activism, 16 days between the 25th and the 10th. But it's very grassroots. And it's, it's very shaped around emergent. So we're not top down. Like I don't say, hey, everybody do this. We kind of have this framework or story, and you're free to use it as in your organization to organize kind of the thoughts and your curricula, and start to propagate that. And we have some great researchers that are associated with it. We have and are able to pull a lot of UN research, which is a great research organization, one of the best. And so these materials can become available if people are interested, and inputs to different meetings. Really, the UN is hard to figure out, but it's a series of conferences, and there are permanent organizations around these conferences, especially like UN Women is creating gender equality around the world. And so they put out great studies on that and hold the CSW and the NGOs, that work on that, gather around that. So, and we really try and bring, youth into that process, and we've really helped change that process by creating a youth forum as part of CSW.
Right. I have a question. Right now, like politically, there are a lot of setbacks in, engaging men in a conversation or making men afraid. Currently, with what's happening around the globe, what's your take on this, Fred?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of political campaigns that try and scare certain populations, and actually, the more fragile gender is actually men. Men have a fairly rigid amount of kind of behavior that's acceptable in most societies, where women actually have kind of changed and updated their software. They're many more different things, wear many much more creative than men. Men are a little fragile. We call it the man box. And young men especially start to indoctrinate each other when they're, adolescents in this man box, that you have to be decisive, that maybe you won't smell so good, but you need to be tough. Maybe you gotta be a breadwinner. You shouldn't be a cheerleader, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe things, they have these boundaries that are, they're artificial constructs, but men put each other in this box of what they think and how they should behave. So, there's a segment of society that's threatened by the equality and advancements that women have made. And we have been able to make a lot of advancements, for women, and it advances men's quality of life at the same time. So if there's advancement in gender equality, it makes men's lives better also. We have more ability to nurture our kids and experience them, open up, talents and sensitivities. Men have to, or said to have to, block off their emotion. And so there's a backlash against, women changing the structures of society, for the better. More real peace, more real security, not this artificial, weapon based dominance, but some true peace and security. So so this backlash against that, against people that hold power in those traditional means and ways. So they are trying to stir up these old kind of ways of behavior to try and reassert their dominance or maintain that. But gradually it is slipping away.
It's changing.
The world. And we just keep on advancing thanks to our partnership and allyship between men and women. So I think there needs to be more of Man Up around the world, or similar organizations hand in hand working with us. But it's all up to the individual and what we call the champion's journey of equality, inclusion, and creating opportunity. And that's really the solution to, squeezing violence out of our society and its structures, and, the indignities that people, and abuses that, people subject other people to. And so, gender, race, all these ways that people try and divide need to be dissolved, because
I know, right?
Exactly.
It's something really very difficult to break, especially if we've been living in that paradigm. Fred, you mentioned about how men behave. From your lens, let me ask, how should men really behave?
Well, I grew up in the Midwest, but my mother, actually, we have similar roots, is from the Philippines, and she was kind of privileged. I mean, her family, her mother was a dentist. She graduated from Santo Tomas University in 1921 as a dentist. So
wow, that's University of Santo Tomas.
University of Santo Tomas, yes.
Yeah, she was, I think, one of the first dentists in the Philippines, if not the first. And she was from a fairly wealthy family. She married a poor husband who was a politician and the first mayor of Calibo, Aklan. After it became, a republic after World War II. But he was a judge through World War II. But I think, I'm kind of losing track of where I'm going. But anyway, I couldn't.
Men should behave.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I in the Midwest, I was definitely, one of the few Asians, and maybe one African American, maybe one Filipino in a class of 30 or 40, or Asian, so I was very sensitive to very subtle racial things, because Midwest was actually kinder and gentler than it is right now, because of I think some of the forces in politics right now is kind of roughing things up a little bit. But there's subtle things that you notice. And so as I grew older, we wrestled, I played football, I did all kind of the guy things that you do. And in college though, my more, I guess, cosmopolitan roommates had for gym class took an all-male ballet class. And
wow.
And so I followed them the next years, because I have to take a PE credit. They had fun.
Right.
Why don't I try it too? And wow, that was kind of an eye-opener as far as, being more exposed to, LGBTQ, because there were mostly guys, and there were more gender non-conforming guys in there.
Right.
And also, once I continued on it, because it really engaged music, which I think a lot of Asian youth have to play an instrument.
Right.
When I was young, for a number of years. And so I was able to connect this athleticism with music. And I was, usually one of 2 or 3 guys in a room of 30 women. And, which is, a great thing in some ways, but it's a very different, thing to have and be in situations like that, and so, I started to peel, the onion of gender. And my mom, though, was a pharmacist. There were professional women, and she was actually really the head of the household. She made more money because of her education in the Philippines, and then she got another degree here. She really it was in the medical profession and as a pharmacist and med tech, and really led our household. And so my grandma was also, I think, the Women's Temperance League was a suffrage actually movement also. And so my my dad's side's grandma was a leader in women and gender, and they actually met because she was, an Irish English background woman, but she was appointed the head of the Philippine Student Association, and my dad would drive them. And so I grew up around these food fairs and international settings. I love that. So I think that's why I'm kind of at the UN and in New York now. But it's really gender norms. Like I lead an exercise, and it's called it's discovering whatever year it is, like 21, 22. It's 100 years into the future, and I have a bunch of different questions, and a little path on cards, and they ask questions like, will animals have rights in 21, 22? And they dance, and people can speak what they feel and walk or dance around these patterns. And what will, different questions about ecology, about rights. So we, in a certain sense, the dancers are starting to envision what it could be like 100 years from now, how
Right.
could be, what technology is like. And it ends as everybody that's done the piece sits and looks at the audience at the end. The last question is, what will a human being be like in 21, 22? And so really it's how we shape it. And there's not a man movement or a woman movement. There's not women singing or men singing,
Right.
Right.
They're humans movements, You can't say, oh, this is a female movement or a male movement. So, pointing out things through your experiential lessons can really, in culture, like arts or sports or whatever, can really show and say, hey, you know what? we're free to shape, our society, what gender equity would be and equality can be together. And, we're always, reshaping and rebuilding our societies into
Right.
better, less violent, and more equality, inclusion and opportunity for all. Because
Yeah.
so much
It
better.
it is a very endless conversation when it comes to shaping how our society would look like 100 years from now, because 100 years back, if we look behind, it was totally different with the upsurge of technology, with all the developments and everything that we have currently in our society, and how we are facing everything that is associated, of course, with our political, social, and cultural beliefs, and how we are
Yes.
engaging the youth right now in the transformation of the society that is very ideal for all the human beings. But Fred, in shorter words, we as normal people who doesn't have like engagements in the United Nations, like how we would want to actively participate in reshaping what we call a very ideal society in the next coming 100 years. How should men and women work together in achieving this?
Yeah, I think, doing little projects in your community around the SDGs, I think are kind of an important thing, and using, our G-Smart framework, sports, music, art, reflection, technology. I think one of our big challenges is climate, right?
Yes.
We
Right.
evolved from the oceans. We evolved in certain temperatures and conditions that are actually very threatened by our own civilization. And so there's a lot of challenges around our communities, environments, and how we actually structure, how we live day to day, and what are companies and choices that they make when we go to work. And we really need to be engaged. And there's a thing called gender mainstreaming. And that means that we need to engage women in all kinds of professions, from politics to fishing, farming, medicine, all areas, because when we get, 30% or more of, the diversity in kind of a dominant male or female environment, we actually get a much more richer and creative environment that can create more value, because it can address the needs of people better. And so, we have a lot of tough challenges to solve around how we make how our energy is used, how we make products, how we, make a living.
Right.
And we are not separated in this world, and I think COVID has shown.
Yes.
This virus.
One virus. It takes one virus to actually put everyone's perspective, enlightened and focused.
Yeah, and it can be spread from whatever, one person to another so quickly. Our fates are intertwined in this world, also the social memes travel the world so quickly. So we're all in this together on this planet. And so it's the action, both, you're doing a project with others or having a real dialogue or discussion on some of these topics is really important with your family or with your community, with your religious organization, with your sport or recreation. And this conversation of gender, I think is one of the most important things. And I think, we have exercises to, find out what's a real woman or what's a real man, break those gender boxes. But it's spotting these inequalities or these opportunities, in these projects, engaging fun, breaking down these roles by people really getting to know each other, by creating value. And I think, young people are kind of a lot of times, trapped in their phone, trapped in their computer screens a lot more than in the past. We used to get out.
That's right.
And, we're all a little out of the habit of interacting and really seeing the differences and enjoying the differences of each other. So we really need to engage with each other and kind of break down and say, hey, we've had some realizations in the last 2 years. How can we make this a much better world? Because we really need to. And so it's really, about refreshing yourself and your passions. That's part of G Smart, is what are my strengths? How can I bring that, to create value in this project, then in my community? And then over time, these different aspects coming out in our lives in different ways to create, a legacy and beautiful treasures of, the heart of our relationships,
Right. It's something not really easy to do, but if we start somewhere, I know that we'd be able to achieve what are in our mission, vision statements, or platforms in creating something more conducive to live, or an environment or a society full of beautiful things around us. For those people who are watching, education is key. Let us check out Google is available, and a lot of information are out there as far as the United Nations Social Development Goals, and as simple as a campaign towards recycling or taking care of our environment, not throwing trash, on the highway or just simply anywhere, could mean a development, with what we are pushing or fighting for. Communication is key when it comes to creating a more suitable environment for men and women to be equal, and propagating whatever is out there. There's so much activities. It will drive me crazy.
Yeah, it also starts from home. As a parent, I believe that how we bring up our kids is our responsibility, and to changing the world and making it better. And so we should teach them values, to learn and to love one another, to have that respect, and everything will go well. I always believe in that it always starts from
society starts from family. And I know that not only the parents would be able to teach values to the children, much more rather than parents should be willing to actually engage in a more active conversation with the new generation to actually see how they view the world or the society, because they're the ones who's going to be left here after all. Fred, I wish I have more hours in a conversation with you, because there's so much things to talk about. But in closing, as a male champion, any message that you want to actually share to our viewers right now?
Yeah, I think mentoring parents is a great way out. My daughter is 14. I've often been the primary caretaker because I run businesses and this nonprofit, so I work flexibly. And so I've been able to enjoy that. So allowing, or having men take a role in parenting, hopefully a more equal role, doing more of the unpaid work related to
the labor of love
and different things like that is I think incumbent on closing the pay gaps and changing society. And then what you said last, really listening to the new generation. My daughter teaches me new things about gender all the time. And because they are dealing with identity and dealing with these issues so much. I mean, they are the guides to the future. They have they see it from where it is, right at the forefront, into the horizon, a little over the horizon that maybe we can't see because we've started to say, oh yeah, we learned that already, but they're reshaping the world at their level, and that's what G Smart is.
Right.
And so they're going and taking the next steps. So to nurture and foster that, I think we really learn as a parent, where the boundary is, is like, you can't just say, I said this, or, you do that, because it's kind of a
kids are smart. They know.
We have to have our boundaries, but they look at our behavior, and, and we have to, in a certain sense, have a faith in their unique people that they are.
Right.
And trying influencing them by setting up a good environment, a set of opportunities that we can offer, not beyond what we can offer, and try and protect where we can protect. We can't, of course, life is, full of risks that we can't control. We never know whether they will go first or we will go first.
Right.
This is the mystery of life. And again, it's the precious moments that we have together. We really have to treasure those. Moment by moment, we construct the future. Each action.
Agreed.
Definitely agree. Well, that was like already an hour of conversation. I wish we had time. We should have more people on Get Real TV to talk about how we could actively participate in reshaping our society for the next generations to come. But thank you so much, Fred. I know in such a short notice, as always, you know me, we've been working together for quite a long time already. But thank you so much for sharing your insights on our gender movement and what can be done and how we could actively participate. Can you share with us your website or where they, organizations can get in touch with you?
manupcampaign.org. You can go there. The G Smart Hub is, an evolving or a new social network that Carlo Sky is, constructed. We have youth leaders. We're very inclusive. Man Up is a tool for you. Both young people and, our generation, that help mentor, coach, volunteer, and are role models for younger people too. So yeah, it's very inclusive. Everybody's included.
Right. Don't forget to check out manupcampaign.org. And as always, Fred, I would like to express my many thanks, and I would like to congratulate you for stepping up, and getting out of the gender box and creating a space for everybody, especially the youth of today, and bringing out such beautiful platforms and programs for everybody to actively participate. The man of the hour, of course, Mr. Fred Sullivan, and thank you. Please don't stop.
Nice meeting you.
What you're doing right now. Thank you, Sherlene. Any last words?
Well, just like what Michael Jackson's song says, right? The children are our future. The greatest love of all, teach them well and let them lead the way, right? So that's a very meaningful song. And let us teach our youths good values, teach them with respect and, be engaged, and like in this kind of organization that Mr. Sullivan has, and they like you said, we will be leaving them here in the world, and we are the ones that mold them to be the better version of themselves.
Right. Well, thank you, Sherlene, for that. Let us always remember to try to break the walls and break the barriers, to create a conversation between men and women, in creating a beautiful society for the next generation to enjoy. Men and women should actually actively participate in teaching the new generations of today how we want our society to shape up in the next coming generation. And let us start and begin with ourselves, and then it will translate and transfer or communicate or circulate with our families, our societies, and for a bigger spectrum, our own communities. It has been a very beautiful Tuesday afternoon, of course, on Get Real TV on PHLV Radio with Sherlene as my co-host. And please do not forget to check us out, phlvradio.com. Don't forget to download our apps for 24/7 streaming of beautiful music, of course. It has been a beautiful afternoon. This is Jeanette with Sherlene D on PHLV Radio, Get Real TV.
It's time to get real. Get real. Talking about the things you wanna hear. It's time to get real. Get real. We got it all right here. It's time to get real. Get real. Better buckle up, get real, get set. It's time to get real. Get real. We got it all right here. Come on. Whoa. Whoa.
Just like a friend from back home.
This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio.